Hello everyone, welcome to the Scumdogs Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and in today's Cryptid Corner mini-episode, I have two UFO stories, to tell you all about today, folks. One, a UFO abduction, another, an encounter with alien reptilians. Let's get into the first article titled, Wisconsin Highway 14 UFO Abduction, Professor and Son Report Missing Time, Medical Exam, and Strange Physical Changes. Sounds fascinating, folks. Let's get into it now. On March 20th, 1988, University professor John R. Shelter Jr. and his son, John Shelter III, were traveling south from Grand Forks, North Dakota, toward a speaking engagement when their trip reportedly took an impossible turn. Somewhere along the Wisconsin Highway corridor, the pair experienced a period of missing time, route confusion, and later vivid memories of a silvery UFO and humanoid figures and beings. What followed, according to Salter, was not only an alleged abduction, but a series of physical changes he believed were connected to the encounter. Let's get into it now. The incident began while my son John III and I were traveling from Grand Forks, North Dakota toward the southern United States. I was a faculty member at the University of North Dakota. At the time, I was on my way to a speaking engagement in Mississippi. We were driving in my pickup truck, following our planned route, when something went wrong. For reasons neither of us could understand, I somehow drove off course. About an hour later, we realized we were traveling in the opposite direction from where we should have been. Neither of us could explain it. We decided to stop for the night rest and continue the trip the next morning. The following day, we were still discussing what had happened. We could not make sense of why we had gone so far off route or why neither of us had noticed it sooner. This is telling, folks, because I know of another story where basically people were abducted and found themselves basically heading back on the highway they were abducted from their destination they were actually going. Very interesting. But let's continue. Then we saw it. A bright, shining object appeared over the road ahead of us. It had a saucer-like form, a slight dome, and an extraordinary silver glow. It looked as if it were surrounded by some kind of energy field. The object did not seem to approach in an ordinary way. It was simply there. The strangest part was a feeling that came over both of us. It felt familiar. My son and I looked at each other, and at that moment we both seemed to understand that this object was connected to the confusion and missing time from the previous evening. Memories began coming back in flashes, and I would imagine this experience of remembering these, memories was truly traumatic for both father and son. I can only imagine just how frightened they both were at this very moment as everything just, as they put it, clicked into place, and they began to probably almost like a PTSD flashback. Remember them basically being abducted by these beings and then experimented on. But hey, let's continue now. I remembered that we had been forced off the highway by something unseen. Then we were standing near the passenger side of the pickup. It was almost dark. I saw 2 or 3 small humanoid figures climbing up the back bumper and looking through the gear in the truck bed. At first, I thought they were children. Then I saw more of them. There were several small beings nearby, perhaps 6 or 7. They were about 4.5 feet tall, and then with thin bodies, thin limbs, larger heads, and large slanted eyes. There was also a taller humanoid figure, nearly 6 feet tall, who looked different from the others. He seemed almost half human and half alien. They communicated with us telepathically. A lot to take in, isn't it, folks? Can you imagine this guy here basically having to come to the realization that he was speaking telepathically with these bizarre alien beings? Presumably the great aliens, folks, it seems like, along with a tall alien. But let's get back to his story and discuss this after we've basically evaluated the full account. Although I was frightened, I did not feel that they intended to harm us. In fact, I felt protected. The taller being seemed to guide us away from the highway and through the woods toward their craft, which appeared to be hidden in a secluded clearing. At one point, I stumbled while we were walking before I could tell where I was going and fall. Before I could fall, something like an unseen energy caught me and kept me from being hurt. The next clear memory I had was being inside a brightly lit room. The walls were curved. My son and I were placed in chairs that reminded me of dental chairs with recliners. We were immobilized, but I do not recall pain or panic in the usual sense. My examination began with something being inserted through my right nostril. Then an instrument was used at the side of my neck near the thyroid area. Another was used at the upper center of my chest near the thymus. I later felt that the 3 areas involved were medically significant. The pituitary, thyroid, and thymus are all connected to growth, metabolism, and immunity. That detail stayed with me. When the examination ended, I felt a strange sense of bonding with the beings. I also sensed that we would meet again. The taller being guided us back to the pickup, and we parted on what felt like friendly terms. The craft then took off, and we returned to the highway. After that, our normal awareness seemed to resume. The event did not end there. Imagine, as we were about to read further into their story, it didn't. Let's continue, though, with it. After I returned home, I began to notice changes in my body. My general health improved. Cuts and scratches seemed to clot quickly and heal rapidly. My hair and fingernails grew faster and thicker. Some marks on my body appeared and disappeared. A scar on my forehead began to fade until it was almost gone. Hair also began growing more heavily on my arms, legs, chest, and stomach, where I had previously been almost hairless. My beard became thicker and darker. I also noticed changes in my awareness that felt psychic. My son did not report the same physical changes that I did, but it was deeply affected by what happened to him. It was the most extraordinary event of his life. For both of us, this was not a terrifying abduction in the way many people describe such events. There was fear, yes, but there was also a sense of protection, familiarity, and purpose. Whatever happened to us on that Wisconsin highway, it changed the way I understood my body, my life, and the nature of contact. JS. Indeed. So, JS doesn't mention that basically he believed in aliens before this event, but afterwards it sounds like he's a true believer now, folks. Very interesting, but still a terrifying experience for anyone, don't you think? But let's move on to the next article. This one involving, well, apparently reptilians literally coming out of a craft, perhaps, folks, and being seen. So let's now continue with it. It's titled Reptilian Humanoid and Silent Cylinder UFO Reported Near La Lisa, Valencia, Spain. And read about this encounter with these strange beings from beyond, folks, and see where it goes. On August 31st, 1968, 3 hunters from Lira, Valencia were in the rugged mountain country near La Lisa, Spain, when a sudden flash in the sky drew their attention. What followed was one of the more unusual European humanoid reports of the late 1960s, involving a tall, reptilian figure, a silent cylindrical craft, scorched tree branches, strange footprints, and a sulfur-like odor left behind. Sulfur, folks, that's been reported in numerous accounts, both with demonic entities and alien beings. Is there a connection? Some people would say yes, some people would say no. But let's read on and hear exactly where this account goes, exactly in all of that. 3 hunters from the city of Lirera, Valencia, all around 50 years old, were in a mountainous area near La Yesa on the afternoon of August 31st, 1968. They had stopped near a ravine and were preparing to cook a tora, a traditional barbecue, when a sudden flash in the sky caught their attention. A few seconds later, one of the men, Mateo Chovo, left his rifle behind and walked toward the edge of the ravine to relieve himself. As he reached the overlook, he saw something on the opposite side of the ravine near a small arroyo, approximately 100 to 150 feet or meters away. Staying beneath a tree was a humanoid figure unlike anything he had ever seen. The being had an athletic build and a lizard-like head. Its eyes were reddish and its hands looked like claws. In one hand, it appeared to be holding a transparent helmet fitted with a white visor. The exposed parts of the creature's body appeared gray. It also had a long cat-like tail that reached the ground. The rest of its body was covered by a white one-piece coverall that extended from the neck to the wrists and down into a pair of large white boots. Attached to its back was what looked like a metallic backpack or rectangular aluminum-colored box. It was shiny, about half a meter long, and had a black antenna-like projection on top. The entity stood beneath the tree as though it were waiting for someone or something. Chover also had the impression that the creature occasionally extended a large, thick tongue from its mouth, though he could not be entirely certain because of the distance. The being did not appear to notice him. Chover crouched behind a nearby bushes and quietly called his 2 companions over. The men approached as carefully as possible and joined him in watching the strange figure. And I have to basically applaud these men for their bravery. Most people probably, as soon as they basically saw this entity, would run away. I imagine his 2 companions didn't know what was going on until after they saw this thing and had no idea what it was. Maybe they had some notion of basically aliens from watching movies, folks, but this was probably a first for all of them. But let's get back to their story. For approximately 3 minutes, the 3 hunters observed the entity in stunned silence. Then, to their terror, a large, dark, metallic cylinder suddenly appeared above the top of the tree. The object reflected sunlight from both ends. The witnesses estimated it was about, and at roughly 30 meters long and 10 meters wide. The cylinder remained completely still, hovering approximately 10 meters above the tree in a horizontal position. It was aligned roughly northeast to southwest and made no sound at all. Terrified, the three men crawled along the ground, folks, with their rifles and hid among nearby bushes. They were convinced that Spain was being invaded by extraterrestrials. All three remained hidden, waiting to see what would happen next. As I said, folks, terrified. Ooh. After some time, they heard a very loud noise coming from the direction of the ravine. It sounded to them like numerous engines or motors starting up, then abruptly stopping. Immediately after that, they saw another bright flash in the sky. One of the men, Gulam, said aloud, "Maybe they have gone." The third man, Ralpha Lapus, remained hidden in the bushes, shaking like a frightened rabbit. Well, I should say, frightened like a animal or a rabbit, folks. Eventually, the hunters gathered enough courage to leave their hiding place. When they looked back toward the ravine, both the reptilian figure and the cylindrical object had vanished. Now calmer, the three men made their way down toward the Roro and filled their canteens with water. They searched the area for any traces left behind by the entity or the object. In the upper branches of the tree where the being had been standing, they noticed some scorching or burning, as if some of the branches had been singed. A strong sulfuric smell lingered in the area, and this is where some people would say they're demons, because sulfur is, well known for demonic encounters, folks. But then again, maybe it has something to do with aliens as well, folks. I would not be surprised. The whole story is truly out there and strange, and we're not done with it yet, folks. And all I can say is that, do you think it was demons, or do you think it was aliens? We'll discuss that point later on. Well, on the sandy ground, they found several footprints. The prints appeared to have been made by flat footwear with no heels. Later, based on the height of the tree branches and the depth of the footprints, they estimate that the entity was at least 2.2 meters tall and may have weighed around 150 kilograms. Following a hunch, the men visited a nearby cave on a hillside. They wondered whether the creature might have come from there or possibly left unused or anything unusual behind. However, when they reached the cave, the entrance was blocked by a thick, heavy brush, making entry impossible. Still badly shaken, they decided to abandon their tour and the hunt altogether. They returned to the place where they had parked their motor scooters. On the way home, they encountered two Garuda civil officers and told them what they had seen. The officers did not write anything down. According to the hunters, the guards simply told them that in those parts such things were a normal occurrence and that others had seen similar things. The hunters returned home and only told their families and closest friends about the incident. I imagine after that, folks, especially with what the officers told them, they probably didn't feel right about telling anyone else. Maybe they thought it was some sort of national secret, and that someone might be watching them if they were basically to start talking about these, things they saw, this alien being and the UFO that presumably picked it up. Or maybe they didn't think anyone else but their families and friends would believe them. Either way, the fact that three men saw it, folks, at least it wasn't just one man who saw this, all folks, because at least these three men have each other and presumably the companionship and, trust of their friends and family to believe them as well. But as I said, folks, it's very odd. Do you think that this alien being was some sort of demon? As I said, we've talked about this lately, folks, about people saying that aliens are demons. I have, my own ideas about this, folks. Maybe the sulfur smell was something to do with the alien. Maybe it smells like sulfur, or maybe it's a byproduct of using its technology, like the UFO as well. But what about the first incident with basically these gray aliens, folks? Now, with that event, it seems very similar to this one, in fact, that we have very little information about it. The witnesses can't basically prove the incident, but all they can basically really say is that at least they had, in the first story, the father and son were together when they saw this, so they have each other. And with the second, the friends had each other and probably have their word to back it up. Either way, both accounts are very strange, folks, and makes you think of what's really out there and possible in the universe. Either way, until more information comes forward, all we can do is speculate on the real truth of all of it. Either way, we're at the end, so please go subscribe to my YouTube channel. Read comics, they're bad for you. You can use the YouTube link down below in descriptions or the chat to go subscribe me. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure at the part of the bell they give you all future notifications, and please share this video out. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great video, so be sure to come back again then. Until next time, folks, I'll see you all again soon.